We've done Rift news, we've done the VGU updates. Why do I feel like I'm forgetting something? Oh. Well, yep, Vex was released a while ago, and it took me a lot longer to get to her story than I would like to. Partially, it's because Rift news are slowly getting more popular than me covering the lore. And partially it's because Vex's story didn't seem to be that interesting. We already knew what happened to her because she was part of the Ruination. But while her bio didn't do much for her, well, her bio didn't actually do anything for her story. The short story that was released on her launch day did do a lot. It truly explained Vex's mental side, why she is actually depressed. But most importantly, the story explained what Yordles truly are. But before we get to that juicy part, let's first go through her bio. Growing up in Bandle City, Vex never felt she belonged. The whimsy and color of the Yordle realm was glowing to her. Despite the best efforts of her parents, she never seemed to find her Yordle spirit or any like-minded friends, and chose to spend most of her time sulking in her room. There she found an unlikely soulmate in her own shadow. It was black, her favorite color, and it didn't talk, the perfect companion for the sullen youth. She learned to entertain herself with the shadow, performing gloomy pantomimes for her own amusement. Alas, it was just a shadow, incapable of shielding Vex from the loathsome cheerfulness that surrounded her. Surely something more lay in store, something darker, something sad, something just like her. That something arrived in the form of a harrowing. Thick clouds of black mist that billowed through Bandle City, stirring its residents to panic. While most Yordles fought valiantly to beat back the mist, Vex was intrigued by the foul miasma and began to follow it to its source. When she arrived in the Shadow Isles, Vex couldn't believe her eyes. Vast tracts of land and sea, devoid of all life and color, stretched out before her. Here she could finally sulk, unbothered by the laughter and merriment of others. As the days passed, Vex realized the black mist was having a strange effect on her. Her shadow had taken to a new ghostly persona, much more lively and expressive than its host, and her benign Yordle magic had transformed into something far more sinister. Vex could now spread her misery far and wide. Who made this wonderfully awful place? She wondered. Her question was soon answered when the ruined king, Viego, appeared in the Isles, seeking to spread his mist to all corners of Runeterra. Upon meeting Vex, Viego realized the Yordle had a unique ability to spread despair, making people more vulnerable to his harrowing. Vex, in turn, was inspired by his vision for a world covered in black mist. The two became fast allies and set out to turn the entire world into a harrowed wasteland. But before Viego's vision could be fully realized, Vex discovered his ulterior motive: to reclaim the soul of his dead queen Isolde and reunite with her in matrimonial bliss. She shuddered in disgust, feeling betrayed that the man she had trusted to kill the world's happiness had, in fact, been seeking it himself. Vex left Viego to be defeated by the Sentinels of Light. His dreams of a matrimonial reunion dashed upon the stones of the Kamavorian wreckage. Alone once more, she watched in disappointment as the world returned to the bright, colorful place she had always hated. Finding a lasting melancholy was going to be tougher than she thought. She knew one last place she could go, a surefire way to achieve the misery she craved. She paid a visit to her parents in Bandle City, eager to show them who she had become and bask in their disapproval. The young Yordle watched as her parents turned dumbstruck, still as tree stumps. Their expressions changed from shock to denial to reluctant acceptance. "Honey, we don't understand this," said her mother, motioning with her finger at Vex's entire being. "But we love you unconditionally," said her father. "And if you're happy, we're happy for you." Rolling eyes, Vex released a loud, exasperated sigh. "You guys are the worst," she moaned. She trudged out of her parents' living room, anxious to return to the Shadow Isles, where she could sulk undisturbed. So, as you can see, her bio is just kinda there. It didn't explain how her shadow came to life, it didn't explain why she is different, and what's worse, it didn't explain what's her deal with the Black Mist. During the event, it was mentioned that Vex was the one spreading the mist around. If Vex didn't help Viego, the ruination wouldn't have happened. But here in the bio it is mentioned that Vex is simply good at spreading misery, and that makes people vulnerable to the mist. The fact that she would be the one spreading the mist is never mentioned. So, truth be told, we still don't know what's Vex's relation to the mist. Or how is it possible that Vex would be better at using the mist than the source itself? Regardless, when we mention that Vex is good at spreading misery, it's kinda difficult to imagine what that means. But thankfully, we get a taste of that in her short story, which is the same story that reveals the truth about the Yordles. So without further ado, let's have a look at the story, The Meaning in Misery. The story begins on the Shadow Isles, where the black mist was especially thick that day, meaning that this likely happened before the rise of the Light Sentinels. Vex was surrounded by a host of specters, who shrieked and hissed at her, hoping she would be in the mood to engage them. Vex sighed and asked if they wanted to play again. She was willing to, but this time someone else would be Gravedigger. Behind her, she heard her Shadow volunteering, but she objected that Shadow couldn't be Gravedigger because she would have to be Gravedigger too. In response, Shadow looked at her with sad, hopeful eyes. And so, even though this was completely stupid to her, she agreed to be Gravedigger together with Shadow, while everyone else would go away and die. Shadow then covered its eyes with its hands and began to count to 100, as the host of specters scattered to find hiding places in the rocks and the ruins around the island. Vex's eyes remained uncovered. Few moments later, she saw something bobbing through the haze in the distance. It was a pair of pointy ears. Then she heard a voice, calling her by her family nickname, Small Fry. Before Vex had the chance to roll her eyes, Uncle Milty, with his arms splayed in excitement, emerged before her. Vex immediately asked what was he doing here. In response, Uncle Milty asked what did she mean? Was it wrong to pay a visit to his Small Fry? Vex urged him to not call her that. As Vex explained that she was kinda busy, that she would appreciate if Uncle Milty told her what he wanted and then got out of there, the specters around them started to emerge from their hiding places, curious about the new visitor. Uncle Milty's face melted then, his resilient smile changing to a look of concern. He explained that her parents, even though they would never tell her, were worried sick about her. Vex was living in some dark sinkhole, talking to ghosts. She had to go home. Of course, Vex told him absolutely not. And that opinion didn't change even after the 3 times Uncle Milty begged her to at least pay them a visit. Just a quick one, pop in and pop out. For one last time, Vex replied no, and she told him to get lost. Uncle Milty frowned at her resistance. But a moment later, his beaming smile returned, and a twinkle sparked in his eye. As he opened a rainbowy portal in front of them, he told her that now there was only one thing they could do. Her parents were about to sit down for a tea. They could join them if they hurried. Milty then grabbed Vex and tried to pull her through, but Vex quickly summoned a thick black shadow at her feet and snuffed out the bright portal. She then told him that it seemed like Milty was more clueless than she had thought. Uncle Milty tried to argue that the place around them was for dead things. Vex agreed, that's why she was here. People sucked. Yordles really sucked. Colors made her wanna puke. And this place had none of those things. Uncle Milty was stunned by those words. But the spark quickly returned to his eyes as he figured out what was happening. Vex obviously spent too much time away from Bandlewood. She had lost her Yordle spirit. All she needed was a couple of days back home. Once more, Milty opened the portal, and that's when Vex's dreading realization sank in. She was a Yordle, would always be a Yordle, and she would forever be tormented by their undying enthusiasm. Unless Vex did something about it herself. A thought popped into her mind. She nearly smiled as she realized the solution to this torture. Summoning her true melancholy in full strength, she gazed at the ground, asking Uncle Milty what was the point of all of this? Of Bandle City, Yordles, life? She quickly glanced up to see Uncle Milty's smile fading. Milty spoke back. The point of life? Isn't it? But before he could actually reveal the point of life to the readers, Vex answered the question for him. She said that they were all just random wets of magic. Who they were, what they did, who their family was. They didn't decide any of it. They were just drifting by like dead leaves, with no control over anything. A strange look of determination came over Uncle Milty. He didn't believe any of it. They could make people happy. They all had the ability to do that. Vex agreed, perhaps that was true. But their happiness never lasted. Just like everything else in this world. Happiness, birds, trees, bugs, rainbows. They would all fade away. That was their purpose. They hang around for a few minutes and then die. Just like all the spirits around them now. Broken, with edges of a frown forming on his lips, Uncle Milty replied that he never thought about it that way. But Vex didn't give him a chance to recover, as she continued that she knew it was a downer, but the point of life was death. Uncle Milty whimpered at that word, but Vex continued still. The worst part of it all was that Yordles didn't even get to do that. They just went on forever, doomed to a stupid, magical, pointless existence. Uncle Milty's lip quivered. Tears shimmering like diamonds trickled from his eyes. The rainbow portal behind him evaporated into the surrounding darkness. He cried then, saying that it was so awful. Uncle Milty then erupted in uncontrollable sobs. They came like thunder, scaring even the wraiths around them. As he ran away crying, Vex breathed a deep sigh of relief. She then turned towards the wraiths and called out that they could all come out now. She was ready for one more game, and sure, why not? This time, she would be Gravedigger. And so, as bland as the bio felt, this short story actually revealed some interesting things. We learned that Vex's depression came from the fact that the Yordles are immortal. And that's because Yordles are nothing but small chunks of magic. So even though she hates the colorful life around her, being a primal force that is part of Runeterra, she can't escape it. She's forever bound to the place that destroys her soul by the immortality of magic itself. She is in a constant loop of torment which she will never be able to escape. Going hand in hand with that, this story also revealed another thing. Being a crucial part of Runeterra, it seems like the Yordles know what's the meaning of life. That is, unless to them it is something like making people happy. But if it's not, if they actually know what's going on with Runeterra. If Vex wasn't an interrupting emo kid, we would have known as well.